All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Emily Spranger. I'm an academic trainer with the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I am joined by my colleague, Jenna Johnson, also academic trainer. Today, she will be helping moderate the chat, answer questions in the Q&A, as we expect to have many participants on our webinar today. One of our very own, Dr. Linda Bloomberg, coming to share her knowledge, her expertise with achieving alignment through your qualitative dissertation. So we're thrilled to be able to have Dr. Bloomberg be a part of our webinar series. She brings a great wealth of knowledge in this area, and we're very grateful for her expertise. Couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar as always, and I will post it in the CTL LibGuides webinar section. Please, we welcome conversation in the chat, so feel free to do that. If you want everyone to see what your comment is, make sure you select the drop down for everyone in the chat function. Sometimes it just defaults to just the hosts and panelists. We welcome questions in the Q&A, and we'll absolutely pause and take time to address some of those questions as time permits. And then the last piece is I'd like you to know that a scrolling subtitle is available to you should you want to view it today in our Zoom. All you have to do is hover over your CC option at the bottom and hit show subtitle. So without any more announcements to begin our webinar today, I will pass this over to Dr. Bloomberg.
Thank you so much, Emily and Jenna, for hosting. And I'm so thrilled to be here because this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. As both of you know, as both of you and everybody else, a lot of you know, students and faculty, that I'm very passionate about qualitative research. And so I'm really looking forward to this discussion today about achieving alignment throughout your qualitative dissertation. As we move through the slides, as I always do, I will be stopping along the way for questions, and we will stop for a longer period of time at the end to take any questions and have some discussion around issues that are of interest or in need of further discussion. So please feel free, as we are going through the slides, to pop your questions and comments in the comment box, and Jenna will gather these up and let me know when I stop at certain points along the way, and we'll take these and talk about them and then move on. So with that said, I'm going to go on. And I just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page with regard to the outcomes and objectives of this webinar. My intention in developing this was so that you could develop a clear understanding of the concept of alignment and gain additional clarity around how to check for alignment throughout the process of conducting and writing up your research. Specifically, my hope is that you will learn more about the purpose of alignment and how it impacts the overall quality of your qualitative dissertation. You'll also learn more about the key elements that are needed to be aligned in order to set up and carry out a qualitative study of high quality. And then also you'll learn more about various ways in which to ensure alignment throughout your dissertation. So there, as you will see, as we move forward, there are many, many different areas and elements that need to be aligned. It's pretty complex, but doable if it's done systematically and with thought. So that said, let's move on to the first point. And that is, it's as simple as getting all your ducks in a row. Really, alignment is about structuring everything so that everything is clearly in order and that each element relates to the elements that come before and after it. I'm going to just read a quote here from my book, and it describes alignment pretty well. So instead of me trying to paraphrase this, I will just read it out loud. Your dissertation is a multifaceted product that should demonstrate that you are capable of conceptualizing, managing, and conducting and presenting a rigorous and comprehensive qualitative research study. Of importance, your final product should also indicate and provide clear evidence that you have addressed alignment at every step of the process and that all of the key pieces of the larger whole are congruent and fit with each other. Another quote is that ensuring that you have achieved alignment among all the key components and elements means that your study is tight in terms of methodological integrity. Methodological integrity is essential at both a philosophical and practical level and is an indication of a study of worth and high quality. And remember, that's what we're all striving to achieve, is a high quality study that we can be proud of once we've graduated. So in qualitative research, alignment needs to occur on multiple levels, as you can see from the slide. And it may look daunting, but it really is doable if each of these different components is addressed at the necessary time. So in other words, you cannot go back and fix something if you haven't fixed it already beforehand, because if it's not set up correctly, whatever comes after it is going to be problematic. So everything needs to start with your research problem and your research design. We then move on to the research problem and the research methodology, which is qualitative research in this case, which needs to be aligned. And remember, I'm going to go through each of these 11 points on each of them on its own slide. So this is just a great overview of what we're going to be looking at now. Third is the research methodology, being qualitative research, and your actual research methods. The methods are how you gather your data and how you analyze your data. The fourth point is your research problem and research purpose. These have to be very, very closely aligned. In fact, the wording has to almost overlap, so that developing your problem and purpose is a key point in being able to move forward successfully, as you'll see. And for those of you who have already gone through this process, in thinking back, I'm sure you'll agree that the problem and purpose, which doesn't always come easily, it may seem simple, but it doesn't always come that easily. But once it happens and once they're aligned, it's like a great aha moment, like, wow, this is how it's meant to look. This is what will work for me going forward. Next is the research problem and the research questions, because remember, the questions shed light on the purpose, and the questions will provide answers to your purpose. So in that respect, the purpose and the questions must, of necessity, be aligned with each other. Number 6 is the research problem and the literature review, which you'll see as we talk about that a little later. 7 is the literature review and the conceptual or theoretical framework. There has to be a very tight fit over there as well. 8 is the theoretical framework, the research questions, and the research findings. So here the theoretical framework or the conceptual framework is what grounds your study. This has to be tied in turn to your research questions, which are developed before you even begin your literature review, and also tied to your findings, which we only develop once you've conducted the study. So you can see everything moves in past, present, and future, and everything has to connect along and across past, present, and future. 9 is the research design, the research findings, and your data analysis. Again, past, present, and future. 10 is the research findings and your interpretations and conclusions. So in other words, what you find in your study, the results of your study, must be aligned with your conclusions and the way that you've interpreted your findings. And finally, your conclusions and recommendations must be aligned with each other, because you cannot make strong recommendations if they're not tied to your conclusions. And that kind of naturally makes sense. So all of this may seem a little bit confusing if we just look at the slide head on, but it's pretty doable and intuitive if we move through these step by step, which I'm going to do. So let's first look at the research problem and the research methodology. In this case, your research methodology is qualitative research. If you're choosing to do a qualitative study, and you've chosen qualitative methodology over quantitative or mixed methods methodology, then qualitative research is your chosen methodology. And you have to, at the very, very beginning, ask, does my intended research idea or topic fit with qualitative research? Remember, the goals of a theoretical research study are either to contribute new knowledge or extend current theory, and that's a PhD. Whereas an EDD, which is a practice-based dissertation, that has to do with the goals of applied research and how these findings are going to be used to understand a problem or generate a practical solution for the problem. So these are the two key differences between a PhD and an EDD. The PhD is theory-based, whereas the EDD is practice-based. And you will need to ask yourself, do the problem, purpose, and research questions have the potential to serve the goal of the research? Is there sufficient theory to explain the phenomenon or a reasonable solution to the research problem, sometimes referred to as the so what test? And I write about that in my book. So a lot of these ideas that we've just discussed here on this slide all have to do with whether your research problem is going to be aligned with your chosen qualitative research methodology. And this will take some thinking, because not all studies are set up to be qualitative. Some of them are better suited to quantitative or mixed methods. So this is your first question to ask yourself. Am I setting myself up for alignment in terms of my chosen research methodology? Second is the research problem and the research design. And I'm going to stop after this slide to answer questions, because I know there must be a lot of ideas swirling around in your mind right now, even at this very brief moment. So in terms of the research problem and the research design, qualitative research includes a variety of research designs. And I'm actually going to change this word here to, well, I'm going to do it afterwards, but it's really not approach. This here should be designs. So qualitative research includes a variety of research designs, which are sometimes referred to as traditions or genres. All qualitative designs are informed by particular values and assumptions, and all of them were developed with specific goals and processes in mind. Each design, be it a tradition or a genre, is characterized by a particular worldview or philosophy that carries with it certain values, including how the quality of research will be evaluated. So philosophy and method create an integrated whole. And when research is approached without clarity, then the execution of that research will be haphazard and lead to inaccurate and meaningless findings. So it's very, very important that your problem and your research design is closely aligned. And remember, these research designs can be case study, phenomenology, ethnography, narrative inquiry, action research, some of the critical genres, etc. So this is what we mean by research design. And I'm going to stop here for a moment.
Thank you so much. A couple of things. Let's see here. This is an interesting question. Is a DBA more focused on the quantitative method? And I've seen that question here or there throughout a couple of times.
I didn't get that. DBA, did you say?
Yeah, Doctorate of Business Administration. Is that more quantitative, more of the quantitative method?
Not, well, firstly, it should be quantitative methodology, but no, it's not necessarily so, because if you're looking at a problem of practice, even in the business world, that could very much be a qualitative study. So qualitative research can cover a number of different fields, be it education, business, health sciences, etc. And qualitative research has been conducted successfully across all these different dimensions. So yes, I would say keep an open mind with regard to that. It is possible.
Thank you so much. And then I do have a couple of questions. Horatio says, thank you. I do have a couple of questions on the title of your book. Are you going to be covering that at some point?
Well, the book is called Completing Your Qualitative Dissertation, a Roadmap from Beginning to End. And I was just telling Emily and Jenna that it's about to come out in a 5th edition. But all of this is drawn from the book.
Okay.
Everything that I'm discussing today is drawn from my own book, and I think it's actually chapter 5.
Can you give an example, research problem, and how you would align it?
With qualitative research or with a research design? Sure. Let's say you're doing a problem where you're talking about, your problem is online. I'm just giving a hypothetical.
Okay.
In the online learning environment, there is very little possibility of students connecting to each other. And this is just hypothetical. It's not a real research problem, because we do know that in the actual world, there are a great number of ways the students can connect with each other in the online environment. But let's just say that's a problem and the student wants to discuss that. Or maybe put it another way, there are limited opportunities to interact. So if you were going to research that particular research problem, if you wanted to come at it from a numbers point of view, you could go into a quantitative study and you could do surveys and statistics to see how many people say that there are limited opportunities, etc. And you could come up with numbers and percentages. But if you want to do a qualitative study where you're really interested in exploring people's perceptions about this phenomenon and what they feel about this, then this would be very well suited to a qualitative study, because you would then go in with methods of data collection like interviews or focus groups or observation even, and try and gather people's perceptions in that way. So if you were intending to do a qualitative study, you could rationalize that this was very well suited to that particular research problem. So there would be alignment between the problem and your chosen methodology, which is qualitative research. Does that make sense? You do have to think about these things though, and you do have to rationalize. And in your dissertation, I believe, even in chapter 1, you do have to give a rationale for your choice of research, of your research methodology. So the way I've just described it, the way that I've rationalized how this could apply to a qualitative study, is what you would need to do with your particular specific research, proposed research problem. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you so much for giving the hypothetical. I really do appreciate that. Would it be okay, Dr. Bloomberg, if we try to do one more question?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I'd like to. I know we have a large, almost 100 people on this
Yes.
call, but I do want to try and take as many questions as possible. And what we don't get through, and Emily and Jenna know this, I'm going to be posting some prompt in the comments tomorrow for us to continue this discussion there, because we really will have too much to cover in the hour that we have available. I can see that already with the amount of participants that we have on this in this meeting.
Absolutely.
Yes, let me take one more now. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, what is the paradigm for descriptive phenomenology research study? Can it be interpretism and constructivism?
Yes, sure. It could be interpretivism and constructivism, or one or the other.
Okay.
Remember, interpretivism and constructivism are both the basis of qualitative research, because they both come at the research methodology from a naturalistic perception. We're not looking at a positivist approach, which is more quantitative. We're looking at more of a constructivist, interpretivist philosophy, where people make meaning of their own reality. That really is what both interpretivism and constructivism mean, that we construct our own reality. Our own meaning is our own truth. In qualitative research, there is no such thing as a single truth. We're not looking to prove anything, and there is no such thing as a fact. It's all about perception. My reality may be very different to Emily's reality, whose reality may be very different to Jenna's reality. And that doesn't diminish any of the realities. They all have meaning based on our own experiences and our own reality and our own worldview, put it that way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bloomberg.
Is there any other one that's come up that I can quickly address?
Oh my goodness. There's several questions. Let me just do this. I think maybe it may be something that you're moving into, but during alignment, my challenge is from paragraph to paragraph. I just started my dissertation process. Do you have any helpful suggestions to align?
So I just want to say this about that particular comment.
Okay.
I would say, with regard writing issues like aligning your paragraphs, our Academic Success Center is the best resource to try and help you get all your writing and discussion in a logical order. That is, in a sense, alignment, but it's more about writing alignment. And that is where the Academic Success Center coaches are so valuable. So please do access them and make use of their services. They're wonderful. And I often refer students to go there.
Thank you, Dr. Bloomberg. I think that's where we should pause for now.
Perfect. I'll take your cue from that. So the next section is the problem, purpose, and research questions. And I just want to take a look at the time because I don't want to run out of time. The problem, purpose, and research questions are the three core critical elements that form the backbone of any qualitative study. The research purpose is an extension of the research problem. And as I said previously, the actual words that you use in your problem should be carried over into your purpose. And those students who have already passed this stage will know what I'm talking about. Those of you who have not yet started working on a research problem and purpose will work with your chair to very, very carefully craft that research problem and then move on to the research purpose. You cannot move to the purpose before your problem is well situated. The purpose in turn provides a framework for the questions because the questions address the purpose. You're kind of getting the drift of how everything fits as a block, as building blocks with each other. So the research questions mirror the research purpose, and they're actually the purpose in narrative form, and they will shed light on the purpose and provide the answers to that purpose. Did I miss one? No. So now comes the research methodology and the research methods. And I'm again going to just quote from my book so that we have a very clear understanding of what is the difference between methodology and methods, because sometimes these terms are used interchangeably and sometimes there's some misunderstanding around this. Methodology reflects the overall research design and the way the researcher goes about conducting a study. The term methods, on the other hand, commonly denotes specific techniques, procedures, or tools used by the researcher to generate and analyze data. A solid rationale for the choice of methods used in your study is crucial, as this indicates methodological congruence and illustrates the choice of methods is grounded in the study's overall research design. I know that's quite a lot to take in, but the basic point I want to make is that methodology is the way you design your study. It's all about qualitative research design, whereas the methods are the actual ways that you're going to collect your data collection tools, and the way that you're going to analyze your data. What are you going to do to analyze qualitative data? So those are the two differences between methodology and methods, and your methods must be aligned with your methodology. In other words, if you're doing qualitative research, you cannot use statistics because that's a quantitative method. You would use methods such as interviews, survey, focus groups, critical incidents, which I love, observation. Those are the ways that you would collect data. Those are your methods of data collection. And then you would use thematic data analysis, which is one way of analyzing qualitative data. You would not use statistics at all. Also, a quantitative method of data collection is a survey, which is purely numerical. If it has no open-ended items, it would be a purely quantitative data collection tool. You can use a survey in qualitative research if you add some open-ended questions where people are able to actually give their answers in words and express themselves that way. Without that element, it is purely quantitative and not suited to qualitative research. So choosing your methods before any data is collected, you need to think very carefully about what methods am I going to use and why. Remember, you cannot just have a string of methods like I'll do focus groups and I'll do interviews and I'll observe and I'll have an open-ended survey and I'll use critical incidents. There's no need for that. Firstly, you need only at least 2 methods of data collection so that you can triangulate them. But also you have to think very carefully about which methods you're actually going to use because it has to be thoughtfully planned. You cannot ask the exact same questions in interviews and then ask those same questions in your focus group because that really there would be no point in that. Why would you be asking the same questions twice? So you have to think very carefully about what methods you're going to use and why. And again, in your chapter, in your methodology chapter, you have to very, very clearly spell out why you've chosen certain data collection methods and how you propose to apply them. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a moment before we move on to the theoretical framework, because I'm sure there are going to be some questions here as well.
Yes, thank you so much. A couple of questions here. I know some students have questions about their personal research as well too. So I think I'm going to hold those to the end. But I do have a question here. Are you going to be able to address the mixed methods with qualitative research, which I believe you're touching on, but anything that you want to expand on more?
I'm really only going to touch on mixed methods because the focus here is qualitative research. But I do want to make one thing very clear. It's often misunderstood in terms of, well, let me say mixed methods is often misunderstood because it's not just a matter of lumping together some qualitative and quantitative methods and saying, oh, and now I have a mixed method study. Because in qualitative research, you can use a survey, which is typically a quantitative method of data collection. But as I said a little earlier on, it has to have a qualitative component, being the open-ended component. But getting back to mixed methods is a very, very specialized methodology. And that is why it's really not recommended for dissertation research, because it's not just a matter of lumping together the qualitative and the quantitative. It's a very specialized approach of applying your research in stages so that some stages are qualitative and some stages are quantitative. There are books written on mixed methods. And because of the length of time and the specialization that is required, it really is not suited to our dissertation process. So chairs will often tell students to please choose between qualitative and quantitative, because mixed methods, to do it in the most rigorous way that is required, is not really feasible.
Thank you so much for touching on that. And I believe you've touched on this a little bit, and you're probably going to expand on it a little bit more, but what are some of the qualitative frameworks?
I'm not sure, do you mean qualitative designs?
I do believe that's what they mean by framework. Yes.
Okay. The qualitative designs, the most common of them is case study, of which there are a number of different types of case study: intrinsic, descriptive, comparative, etc. And I write a lot about all of these in my book, and there are also a huge amount of other books and articles that deal with this. There is also action research, which is very well suited to educational research problems. There is phenomenology, ethnography, narrative inquiry, and then all the critical methods of critical genres. The most commonly used qualitative research design in dissertations is case study, because it is bounded. Case study is by its nature a bounded method of a bounded research design, meaning it has clear boundaries that can be managed within a space of time, as a dissertation process is. Remember, you don't want to spend years and years on your dissertation, which some of the other methods do need a really much longer period of time, like ethnography, like phenomenology, like narrative inquiry. So we really try and encourage students to adopt a case study design if it fits with their research problem. Again, you cannot just force fit something. If the research problem is a good fit with case study, then that would be a good way to go. If it's more of a narrative inquiry or an ethnography or even a phenomenological research problem, then one of the other designs can be adopted. But remember, you do need to also develop the skills that come with those research designs. Phenomenology, for instance, has very specific ways of interviewing. It's much, much more in-depth than case study. And it also has very, very specific ways of analyzing data. Another research design that I failed to mention is grounded theory, where the researcher actually develops a new theory. This is really not recommended for our dissertation research, because a grounded theory study, to be conducted properly, needs an enormous amount of skill and can take an enormous amount of time. So I hope that answers that question.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to try to get two more in during our time. I know that there's still several things to cover. With a qualitative case study, what is a good number of participants to interview? I've been told 5, I've been told 10, even 20. With so much research, I've been told by several professors 5 participants would be a vast amount of data. Yet I get different opinions from different professors. Any comment?
Yeah, all I'm going to say about that is, just because in the interest of time, I want to stay with alignment and not specifics like that. But I just want to say, please do be in touch with your dissertation committee, because there are many different viewpoints on this. And also read up on case study. There are certain optimal numbers. And remember, the more participants you have, you don't have to have more than 15 to 20 in a case study, but the more you have, the richer your findings are going to be, compared to if you have 2 people or 3 people.
Okay. And then this is the last question I'll leave us with right now. And there are, again, like you mentioned, a few specific personal research questions in here. So we are going to make sure that we advise you to speak with your chair or your committee.
And also in the Commons.
Okay,
put those
great.
questions in the Commons, speak to your chair, and also let our Commons community weigh in, because a lot of our faculty and students have got a lot of knowledge in this area already. And a lot of people have derived a lot of assistance in the Commons just from hearing different people's point of view.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bloomberg. And you keep mentioning case studies. So maybe someone's in the very beginning of their dissertation process. Could you describe what is a case study?
Again, I'm not going to go into that simply because I really want to keep the focus on alignment here so we can satisfy the purpose of this webinar. But that's a great question and something that really needs to be understood before you can think about adopting that design. So read, ask your chairperson. There's so much information. There are books written on case study. Yin and Stake are the two proponents of case study research. They go back to the 1990s, both of them, but both of them have updated their work as well. And they are really the experts on case study, Robert Yin and Robert Stake.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bloomberg.
Of course. I wish that I could answer all these questions. I also just want to be respectful to the people that are on this webinar who have come here specifically to learn about alignments, that we don't have to end and not having covered everything that I want to cover. So thanks very much for understanding. Thank you. So the next we get to is the theoretical framework, the research questions, and the research findings. Remember, your findings must provide a direct response to the research questions. The conceptual or theoretical framework becomes the repository, like it's the bank for the findings. And you'll learn more about this when you get to this stage in your research, because your theoretical or conceptual framework actually becomes your analytic framework. The organization and presentation of your findings must align with the research questions, and the organization and presentation of findings must also align with your research design, be it case study, grounded theory, ethnography, phenomenology, narrative inquiry, action research, etc. Whoops. Next, we get to research design, findings, data analysis, and data interpretation. So your choice of qualitative analysis must align with the philosophical underpinnings of your chosen research design. Remember, as I said earlier, for example, phenomenology has its own specific philosophy about how data is analyzed. Case study has its own specific philosophy about how data is analyzed. Grounded theory, same thing. Narrative inquiry, same thing. Ethnography, same thing. So there's no real generic approach to qualitative data analysis. Each of the different designs has its own specific philosophy about this, and that is why choosing a very highly specialized design like narrative inquiry or ethnography or grounded theory goes along with a lot of skill. And if you are really intent on using one of those highly specialized designs, you'll have to do quite a lot of learning to understand what is required to actually conduct a study properly in that specific design. The findings of your study, which are objective, remember the findings are the findings. It's not what you create. It's not what you think. It's the findings that you get from analyzing your data. So the findings cannot be tampered with. They cannot be retroactively fit into something else. So the findings are the objective findings. And these are the basis for your interpretation, which is your subjective interpretation as the researcher, as the qualitative researcher. So the qualitative researcher is often referred to as the researcher as instrument. And this means because this is because the qualitative researcher is actually the instrument of data collection and data analysis. You as a human being are collecting data, and you as a human being are interpreting that data, which means it's subjective, which means that your biases and your assumptions are going to come into play. One cannot claim that you're going to be completely objective because no human being can be completely objective. So the way we work around this is by acknowledging your biases and assumptions upfront in your research process. And in fact, also describing and being explicit about your positionality, which I write a lot about, especially in this new edition of my book. We all come with positionality. Positionality means how I am positioned in relation to my research participants. So as the researcher, we have power in a way over our research participants, and that cannot be denied because we are collecting data from our research participants. We are actually setting up the research study in a way that we choose to set it up. And we're analyzing and collecting that data in our way, in our own way. So yes, of course, everybody who participates in the study has given consent to participate, and they do need to provide written consent. But ultimately, it's up to the researcher to decide what the findings mean. And that is the interpretation, which is subjective. And it's our interpretation of what we see in the findings. Now, remember, we do send back our interpretations to our research participants, which is called member checking, to ask them what they think about these findings and interpretations. We always allow the research participants in qualitative research to have a say and a voice in terms of how they're being represented. And there's a lot written about representation because we really strive to represent our research participants in the most authentic and accurate manner. We are not seeking to do research on people. In qualitative research, we do research with people. And I'm going to stop there again for a moment.
Okay. And
I know there was a lot there, but I hope I made it very clear about the central thrust of qualitative research and how we analyze and interpret our findings.
Yes. Oh my goodness, Dr. Bloomberg.
You're making me nervous when you say that.
So many questions. Let me see here. 1 second. Okay.
And please don't be dismayed if we don't get your questions.
Yes.
The Commons will be our spot.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
And I've actually mentioned for a few people to please go there because we'd like to have the conversation there as well too. I have a question about surveys and bias. It looks like, oh, excuse me. It says, can you use a survey as the basis of your participants to interview? And then I'm wondering, as you were referring to your own biases, what kind of goes into that in developing your survey?
There's always bias that goes into developing any data collection tool, whether it's an interview or a survey, because you are creating it from scratch. That's what we do in qualitative research. We're not typically using an instrument that's been validated or created by somebody else, as in quantitative research. So you are setting up your study with your problem, your purpose, your research questions, and then your instruments, your methods. Now, if you're developing, for example, interview questions, you're going to be basing those on your research questions. And here we go back to that whole idea of alignment, that your research questions are the framework for your interview questions. In the same vein, your research questions are the framework for your survey items. So you have to make sure that all the data that you gather are going to be providing answers to your research questions. So if there's misalignment, and I've had this happen with some students, where their interview or survey questions are not directly aligned with their research questions, then when it comes time to getting those findings, you're going to get a rather rude awakening because your findings are not going to respond or correspond or be aligned with your research questions. And your whole study is going to be out of sync because you're not going to be having something substantive in terms of, well, this is what my findings say in response to the research questions. So going back to the question, in developing your data collection method, be it a survey or an interview, of course, your own subjectivity and bias is going to come into it because you're wanting to gather information that is important to you and that relates to your specific research problem. And you are creating this instrument yourself. So you have to be very in tune with asking questions that are unbiased, questions that are open-ended. Even though you may carry your own personal biases, you cannot impose those on your research participants. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And I have a couple of questions here. Couple of questions about the analysis of qualitative data. So Francis asked, If qualitative researchers are instruments for data collection and analysis, why use qualitative software to analyze qualitative data?
This is why, and I love that question. Thank you. Qualitative data analysis software, QDAS, is a fantastic cool tool for organizing and coding data. But, and this is the big but, the software cannot do your interpretation for you. Only a human being can do that. So while the qualitative data analysis software is very useful in the beginning to generate codes and even themes from those codes, you then have to take that and look at it with your own human eyes and your own human mind and analyze that data. So that is where the human as instrument, the researcher as instrument comes in, because the data analysis software can only do so much. It's not a human being.
Okay. And then this is the last one I'm going to do for now, because we have about 15 minutes left. So how does alignment between problem and purpose shift if your problem is lack of knowledge about phenomena versus problematic phenomena itself?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
Okay.
Can we keep that one for the comments? I'd like to think about it, because I'm not really sure what's being asked.
No problem. I'm going to go ahead and copy it.
So whoever posed that question, please do put it in the comments so that we can look at it more carefully, and I can answer it more thoughtfully.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bloomberg.
Okay, of course. So let's move on to the next, which is the research findings, conclusions, and recommendations. So the findings and interpretation together are the basis for drawing trustworthy conclusions. Each conclusion should be tied to a finding or a set of findings. And conclusions are the springboard for developing actionable and doable recommendations. Remember, your recommendations should not be just theoretical. They should be practical and doable. And we typically require recommendations for practice, for policy, and for further research. So in all those three areas, you have an opportunity to think about actual specifics that you can recommend based on the findings of your study. And in my book, and I know that I've listed it here, I have a chart called the if, then, therefore, thus matrix, which is extremely useful in trying to align your conclusions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations. It's a simple but very effective chart that allows you to really structure everything so that you can see that everything is in sync. Next is the research problem, the literature review, and the conceptual or theoretical framework. Your literature review must clearly define the selection of relevant and appropriate bodies of literature. Each body of literature must be tied to or address some specific aspect of the research problem. Remember, otherwise it's irrelevant. So we must make sure that the literature review is tied to the research problem. The conceptual or theoretical framework must be situated within the body of literature that you're reviewing. It cannot be something out there that's completely unrelated to everything else that you're reviewing. The theoretical or conceptual framework is a very specific part of your literature review. And it, as I said earlier, it becomes an analytic framework later on. So it becomes practically useful when it comes time to analyze your data, because your codes and your themes are all related to your conceptual or theoretical framework. Remember, a theoretical framework does not mean that you have to develop a theory. Somebody asked me that question earlier today. A theoretical framework is the theory that your study is based on. And if your study is not based on or grounded in a theory, then you can choose a conceptual framework in place of a theoretical framework, but it is a framework nonetheless because it's based on a set of concepts or just one concept. And the conceptual or theoretical framework must emanate from your research questions. So here again, you can see that crisscross, tied together, clearly fitting together pieces of the puzzle right across the entire spectrum of your dissertation, right from the research problem and the methodology, through the methods, to the literature review, to the conceptual framework, to the findings, conclusions, and recommendations. So every single aspect of your study must be methodologically congruent or aligned. Those two really mean the same, and both of those words, alignment and congruency, also mean in sync, like the ducks in a row. So as I said earlier, I'm going to stop now because we now have a final about 12 minutes for questions. Everything that I've discussed today has been drawn from this book, and I'm now open to further questions.
Okay, wonderful. Just a heads up for folks. Yes, I am going to email the webinar to you for all of our attendees today. And of course, we will post it in the CTL webinars LibGuide page, as we always do. Let me see. Let me start here. What are some, and Dr. Bloomberg, if it's something that we can't address because you would need more information, that's totally fine. Just let me know,
Okay,
and
I'll let you know.
we'll have those conversations in the comments.
Okay.
What are examples of theoretical framework with qualitative research?
There are so many types of theoretical frameworks. It really depends on what you want to ground your study in. One can use constructivism as a theoretical framework. One can use critical race theory. One can use leadership theories. It's very, very specific to your research problem. So there are hundreds of different theories out there that one can draw on to talk about and to base your study on. So that's a very broad question and something to think about, and also talk with your dissertation chair about. What are the options I have here? What should I consider? What is feasible? What makes the most sense? Because remember, you only need one. You only need one theory. Some people have a set of theories, but it does make the findings and analysis more complex if you have more than one theory.
Thank you, Dr. Bloomberg. I am doing individual semi-structured interviews and a focus group. Where do I get questions from? Can I use questions from other research?
Again, this is not really an alignment question, but I'm happy to answer it. Yes, we can always look at other research and other dissertations to get ideas. But remember, the value of qualitative research is that you design your own instrument that is specifically tailored for your research problem. So this is a great opportunity to take your research problem and your purpose and your research questions and say, what am I really trying to find out? What am I really trying to understand here? And develop a set of research questions or survey questions based specifically on your research problem. Now, you may get some ideas from others, but typically you're going to design something that's completely brand new and unique to your study.
Thank you, Dr. Bloomberg. And not quite sure if this is similar to the last question, but I believe this question is how to align oh, forgive me, this might be missing a few words. How to align is lack of awareness. How to align the problem is lack of awareness. Forgive me, I might be missing part of that. Okay.
If that question can be restated in the comments, I can try and help out with that.
Thank you so much. Someone has a question about maybe they're in the very beginning of their doctorate program. What is data analysis?
Well, data analysis is a very broad term, but qualitative data analysis, if that's the question, is the way that we analyze qualitative data. So once we have the findings, once all the recorded transcripts have been transcribed verbatim, which means word by word, and you have these long sheets of your interviews with all the words in exactly the same wording that your participants have stated it, with nothing changed. The data would then be coded. After coding, you develop themes, and that's part of the qualitative data analysis process. As I said earlier, one can use qualitative data analysis software to organize your transcripts and to develop codes, but ultimately it's incumbent upon the researcher to analyze and interpret those findings, which is what we call a broad term qualitative data analysis. And sometimes it's referred to as thematic analysis.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bloomberg. Would you mind going back one slide just so people can see the title of the book again? We got a couple of questions for that.
Just remember, though, that this book will be discontinued shortly, and the new edition will be out, the 5th edition.
Are we allowed to know when the new edition is going?
Yeah, the new edition will be out in August, September.
Okay.
It will be a 2023 date for the 5th edition. And the 5th edition has the same chapter on alignment, slightly revised that this 4th edition has, but it also has brand new sections on positionality, rigor, ethics, and a lot of issues that have come about since COVID in terms of how to conduct ethical, rigorous qualitative research, including this whole idea of positionality, which is a key component of qualitative research, because as I said earlier, we all as human beings come with our own biases and assumptions. So none of us are neutral, none of us are objective, and none of us are unbiased. And it is actually an error to state that we are, because we cannot be. So rather declare your biases and declare your assumptions and your positionality. And that's part of really good qualitative research.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And someone said, come on, 5th edition. So in chat.
I'm trying. I'm on the final stages of the edits with my publisher right today, in fact.
Wonderful. Okay. This was just expanding on that question that I think makes a tad bit more sense right now. So how to assure alignment if the problem is lack of awareness? So having to deal with alignment.
Can that person maybe be unmuted and just say
Yes.
state exactly what
Yes,
they
of course.
mean, so I can have a better idea of what they mean by lack
Yes,
of awareness?
Of course.
Wonderful.
I have it as, it says CAHS Yolette. Are you able to unmute by chance? So you can let us know a little bit more.
Okay, great.
Yes, in fact, I had posted the comment last year, and you had very kindly gave a little highlight. Basically, if people are stuck in a paradigm, but they don't even know they are, but that's causing the problem, how do we work with that? Because we're coming at it with our own perspective, are we not? The positionality. So the problem is not some. The reason why there's a problem is that people don't have a knowledge base. They don't know that they're stuck in a paradigm that's very much outdated. And that's causing a very serious problem. So how do we work with that?
Well, you would have to state the problem very clearly so that it makes like that, so that it's a crisp sentence that clearly explains what the problem is, like what you just said, but create a strong sentence. And then aligned with that, you would have to create a purpose statement, which is to explore that problem or better understand that phenomenon. And you would then create your research questions based on your purpose. So you would start with a very, very clear problem statement, one sentence. And also that problem statement should be substantiated by some literature and prior research. So in other words, we don't just take a problem out of nowhere. A problem is something that's generally been spoken about before or experienced before, or there's some sort of research about it, usually. And you would then use those citations to substantiate your actual problem statement. But yes, you would just, as with any problem, you would start with your problem statement, then move on to your purpose, and then move on to your research questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let me see. There's several questions in here again that look to be a tad bit personal questions about their own research. So I'm just wondering if there's any other questions about alignment that you would like us to address for you. I know we have a few more moments here. While I'm waiting for someone to pop something in about alignment, does conceptual framework in qualitative research differ from conceptual framework in quantitative research?
I don't believe so, because a conceptual framework is a conceptual framework, no matter how you apply it. And a conceptual framework is based on a concept or a series of concepts. So I'm imagining that in quantitative research, it applies the same. I just want to keep this, I'm going to keep this open while you're asking, because this webinar is one of a 4-part series, as Emily and Jenna know. And the next 3 that I'm doing are all about aspects of qualitative research. So this here on the screen will give you an idea of what's coming up next on July 13th, August 1st, and August 30th.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to scroll on down here at the very end and see if there's any other. Okay. What do you do if you have a theory that is usually used in another sector, like healthcare, but it's applicable to your to education as well too?
Oh,
Can
that's
that
fine. Yeah,
that theory
why not?
can be
Yeah,
used in the
yeah.
lit review, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. A theory is not discipline specific. If you can apply it meaningfully and it has relevance to your specific discipline, then absolutely you can bring over, for example, you can use a leadership theory, which is typically business in education. So theories are interchangeable. But again, it must be applied thoughtfully and with relevance so that it makes sense.
Okay, great. And here's what I'm going to do too. I'm going to go ahead. I realize that we haven't been able to get through all of the questions today. We had over 100 people on the call, so I appreciate everyone's patience as we got to your questions in the chat and in the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and export some of the questions here in the Q&A just to see if there's anything else that I can go over with Dr. Bloomberg, or we can have these conversations in the comments as well too. I do want to thank everyone so much for your participation in the chat and the Q&A. And again, please don't hesitate to put your comments in the survey that you should be getting after this webinar, so we know what other kind of webinars you would like to see in the future that are centered around the dissertation process. Always looking for your feedback. Dr. Bloomberg, anything else you would like to say in closing?
No, I think I've said everything. I just want to say thank you so much to the CTL, to Emily and Jenna for hosting this, for moderating, for helping me get to the questions. I know there were a lot of people on this call, and I know there were a lot more questions that people wanted to ask. But I think our wonderful Commons is the perfect venue for this, to continue this discussion. And so I really look forward to, once I've posted this, and I will post it in the NCU community forum so that everybody in different schools will have access to it.
Wonderful.
And this will be posted, I think, by tomorrow, right, Emily?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
And then we can have these discussions in the Commons, and everybody, please feel free to join in. Let other people who weren't even on this call, who may be interested in this topic, know about it. And I look forward to this ongoing rich discussion, because achieving alignment is really central to achieving a rigorous qualitative study, as are the other 3 aspects that I'm going to be dealing with in the coming months: ethics, trustworthiness, and the qualitative researcher's role, where I'm going to be talking much more about power and positionality. So look out for those, and I look forward to everybody joining. And again, thank you so much to the CTL for hosting.
Absolutely. And Dr. Bloomberg, for all of our attendees, please do attend our future webinars centered around qualitative research. And we appreciate you, and good luck to everybody out there pursuing their research and going through the dissertation journey. So until we see you the next time, we hope you all take well.
Thank you.